In terms of the network here, each one of these represents a different grouping of buildings, data, and people. And in this case, the city of Tacoma has 7 individuals who have access at the portfolio or the program level, but these individuals don't have access to this portfolio in DC, and so on and so forth, unless we grant them access. So as I go through this demonstration, just keep in mind that this is an entire social layer on top of this information space. So let's dive deep into one of the regional programs here in DC. Now, if I scroll down, I can see all the individuals who have access to this information space. And simply by adding an email, I can provide secure access. I can define a role, whether these are guests, which just read access, or managers who can actually write information and change it. And I can invite them to pull and interact with this information both through a secure API or through the user interface. And this really allows us not only just to provide data access, but to provide access to these engagement channels. So these regional collaborators can start actually interacting with all the building level collaborators and tenant level collaborators. Now, if I scroll up, each of these tabs represents a standalone application that knows what information is in this portfolio or this sustainability program and can actually develop different visualizations and analytics to make sense of it. And depending on what access point you are in the system, if you're a building level, we'll get to that, you'll have a whole different set of tabs and applications that you have access to. And Maalka's whole goal is to enable third parties to contribute to this ecosystem of applications and value-added tools for these different networks of individuals. So as I go through this, I'll go through the tabs in a bit, but just to explain that point a bit further, if I enter a building, let's say Adams Place Emergency Shelter in Washington, D.C., I enter the next level down in the system. If I scroll all the way down...
Remus, sorry to interrupt you. Can you maximize your window a bit so we can see a little bit more of your screen? Because right now we're seeing your entire desktop.
Oh.
I don't know if you can.
I'm maximized on my desktop, so I'm not sure.
Okay, no problem. It's fine. We can see what you're doing.
Let's see if I can... Let's see if this works. Is that better, Robert?
No, can't see anything now.
Okay.
Just continue on. Sorry.
Maybe I can reduce the size here. Not sure if this is getting better or worse.
No, it's getting worse. Just go back to where you were, please. That was fine.
Interesting. Okay. I'm not sure what everyone is seeing, but we're now at the building level of this network. So similar to how we can invite individual collaborators at the regional or the portfolio level, we can add individuals to have access to just information that is structured at the building level, simply by adding their email and, again, their role in the whole program. And each of these tabs here now represents a different way to interact with the data, understand, and actually develop new applications for a building level perspective. So all of a sudden, a third-party application developer who's got a fantastic analytic to, say, analyze air quality data can develop something that individual building owners can subscribe to. And it's developing this ecosystem of innovation that Maalka is really striving for, one that really leverages the network components of sustainability programs, as well as the scalability aspects of all the data that Maalka is hosting. So before I get into some of the building level tabs, now I'll just go through some of the applications of how this actual data can be interacted with. So in this case, I have all of the buildings within Washington, D.C. for the Department of General Services, which is about 275 buildings. I can start interacting to understand the trends across the data. In this case, it's built around energy efficiency. I can look at a map, for instance, to see where the buildings are and actually know how to drive these metrics. So if I look at this, the height of the bars here represents the energy use intensity of these buildings. So I can start now looking at new buildings. I can start looking at new buildings whose energy use over time is getting worse. And then I can actually use this as a navigational tool to enter the building to do a deeper dive and interact with those building level stakeholders. This is one way to interact with the data. We can start looking for outliers. In this case, I find the K-12 Randall Heights Elementary School here is using a lot more energy than the rest. This could be due to data error, which we have built-in data validation mechanisms. So I can, again, enter and navigate, and the whole navigation between the portfolio and the building level is something that needs to be seamless, and that's what we've spent a lot of time really executing. We can understand different distributions of different metrics. In this case, again, we call them themes. This is the energy theme of Maalka, but these could be distributions of different air quality metrics. It could be distributions of wellness metrics being gathered for different compliance and reporting purposes. It doesn't matter. We have the ability to engage individuals with different things like incentives. So maybe if I'm in Denver, for instance, I can look at different Colorado-based incentives for installing solar or driving an energy efficiency upgrade. And now, really driving it back to the outreach and engagement mechanisms of Maalka, we come to the progress management tab here, actually the outreach tab. So another central tenet of Maalka is we want to allow individuals to derive value from what Maalka can do without ever having to log into Maalka. That means that we want to integrate with other technologies that do their job very well for communications. In this case, we've integrated with MailChimp. This provides us with a dynamic list of every building in this program. We can update this list if we add individuals to that building to see how many members there are, how many collaborators. And then we can start developing templates that take information, a real-time snapshot of information across the portfolio, and serves that information through email and potentially SMS to each one of these collaborators across the network. So if I look at a template, for instance, here, we can actually create one just to show how it works. So we'll do DOC energy template. And any user is able to create this. They can now start taking basic visualizations that we've created, adding messages based on real-time snapshots of this information. So in this case, let's say we want to put a energy use intensity report to this information space. What this is doing, it's going back to one of the tabs, taking a snapshot in real time of this information and posting it there. And we can start formatting this information. We can center it, expand it, and then we save it. So now, all of a sudden, we've developed a new template that can be served through CRM tools, customer relationship management tools, through emails, that we can start tracking the engagement, the click rates, the opens of this information. So all of a sudden, a city like Chicago, which has 3,000 buildings and different participants, can start really sending targeted, contextualized reports to those individuals. So to show how you do that, we can go back to the Details tab here. I can say maybe I want to send that report to every building that was built after a certain year. So in this case, we'll choose 1950. I can go back to Message Selected Participants. We'll say Energy Report. You can select the template that I just created, the DOC Energy template. It'll populate this information, again, creating this snapshot for everyone, and also at the same time aggregating the communication information, in this case the email addresses associated with each collaborator in the network. And these tags will say hi, and if I'm sending it to Robert, for instance, it would say, hey, Robert Peasley. I can put in, like, here is your energy profile. And I can press send. I won't do that here because I'm not sure who's on this network at the moment. But we can set up this type of information exchange at a regular cadence. So maybe we want to do a quarterly report based on the air quality or the indoor environment of all the buildings of a portfolio. Perhaps we want to send this as a survey type of style mechanism where individuals can reply and we can track this information at a portfolio level. In that case, one of these tabs would actually be a survey-based tab where we can see the uptake information as it becomes available. We can see the quality by setting different validation rules and parameters. We can see the quality across the portfolio by seeing how the distribution of different data errors actually lies. And we can actually create more and more templates to interact and allow third parties to develop these templates to interact with our building level stakeholders. In this case, we created another type of template for the Better Buildings Challenge, which is a Department of Energy program that cities and corporations around the United States are adopting. We worked alongside with representatives in Chicago to develop reports that at the building level are dynamically generated, served, and act as a point of discussion about program progress and goals. In this case, this is 200 I Street, which is an office type of building in DC. We can show missing data, so an individual, to make sure the data is up to date and of high quality, can see this report, actually take action, and resubmit that information, so at the portfolio or program level, I can be confident that the data is up to date. I can see comparison metrics to other similar building types. I can see a breakout of different supporting information based on rules that the template is enabling me as a user to set. I can see changes to the building over time if this was reported. Perhaps the building was unoccupied for a period of 6 months that really reduced energy consumption. This is information, asset level information, that program managers and cities are extremely interested in tracking. And then ultimately, I can give some next steps and a digest of information. One program in Chicago is using these reports and printing them out every quarter, serve them to the building managers, to which they have these conversations, and they continuously track the progress of this information. So these types of reports are driven really based on what type of data is available. We allow individuals to develop their own analytics on top. We can coordinate with research institutions to do that. And then ultimately we set a configuration file that allows different access points to different tabs based on this information. There's things like a Dropbox functionality, for instance. In this case, there's no files attached. There's a different type of progress management report that's being served. And these are based on patterns that we wanted to replicate for every city in the United States that are definitely replicable in different countries around the world, at least to jumpstart their energy efficiency initiatives. And once they have these networks in place, then they can very easily start expanding them to incorporate waste and water management metrics. One last aspect before I show, actually I'll go to California. So this is a different theme. So rather than showing the energy efficiency or energy benchmarking initiative, we worked with data supplied by the California Energy Commission for that 3,000 buildings or so. And this data presents not just performance information about the building, but also economics about the program in the state. So all of a sudden, I can start doing analysis on how much money did the state spend on lighting exterior retrofits. In this case, it approved $80 million in projects. We can see of those projects how many were completed. We can focus on the ones which have not been completed. We can look at a map where these projects were actually completed. In this case, we see some data errors. There's a building here in Alberta and one in Massachusetts. We can interact with this information by zooming in to a state, identify some trends where perhaps we want to look at which buildings and projects have a really slow return on investment projected. This is an entirely different perspective on economic sustainability for the state. They want to understand where is their money going and what is the ultimate impact of this information. But just as importantly, we can very easily create a network, a new network on the fly that allows these engagement layers to really take hold. So for instance, if I wanted to create a new program which looks at just San Jose and Bakersfield, California buildings, I can come and create a new portfolio, which is San Jose and Bakersfield. I think these were lighting, exterior retrofit upgrades. And what this does, it dynamically generates a new layer, a new network, which has all the same building level components to it, but has a different combination of a program. So you'll see there's no collaborators listed at this network level. So now I can basically invite a Bakersfield or San Jose representative who's very good at understanding how to interact with their constituents here to provide them secure access, but they won't have access to buildings in San Francisco or Los Angeles. And very similarly, they'll have a whole slew of tools available for them that understands that the only cities that we have access here to are Bakersfield, San Jose. We can start looking at the different types of information that is being collected. So in this case, Chicago's data was coming on an annual basis. California was actually collecting information at a 5-minute interval basis. So if I look at Abraham Lincoln High School, for instance, you see this Prop 39 tab is a different workflow that's enabled by a new type of data that's not available to other cities. So this was customized for the California Energy Commission for them to track things like energy efficiency measure implementation, cost and economic metrics, and actual performance metrics by these different aggregations over time. So in this case, we can zoom in the last month of data. This is all in 5-minute interval data, and it's all structured to allow third parties to access this information and start building new analytical layers and visualizations that really help the California Energy Commission and each individual school track progress towards their goals that they've set and actually coordinate actions to implement these measures and really achieve those goals in a much more efficient way. So with that, that is the quick demo of how we can actually create cross-sections of different data, creating new layers and new networks of information, individuals and buildings, and how to actually customize applications and manage them in this kind of tabular format that Maalka's really spent a lot of time making sure this is a very easy-to-use tool. So, Robert, I know we're at 40 after, so I was thinking I'll step back and just allow some questions to come through, and we can go from there.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks so much, Remus. That's the third time I've seen you make a presentation, and I'm just as impressed as I was the first time. And I hope as people are queuing up their questions, I mean, this is the reason I really wanted Remus and Maalka to be one of our first speakers in this series, this webinar series, is we keep hearing all the time about all this data and all this data being collected, and at least for me, it's been always difficult to visualize how this data can be used by sort of regular people. And I think Remus has given us a great example of how that can happen. So please do chime in with your questions. Operator, do we have any questions yet?
If you would like to ask a question from the phone lines, please press star then 1, unmute your phone, and record your name when prompted. If you need to withdraw your question, please press star then 2. Once again, if you'd like to ask a question from the phone lines, please press star then 1 and record your name when prompted. One moment, please. Questions are still queuing up.
Thanks, Katie. And I'd like to take the time just to reemphasize that Maalka itself isn't just a data management tool. It's a workflow management platform. We don't claim to be experts in the best analytics for every type of sensor that's coming out there. All we want to do is allow a user to understand their place in the sustainability program and actually access information that is most relevant to them. And that is the whole philosophy, is developing this social network, this social engagement layer around this, and then enabling third-party application developers who do excel in these analytics and visualizations to contribute. And these could be open source initiatives based from academic institutions or nonprofits, or these could be for-profit kind of ventures. Maybe there's an expert in demand response that wants to create an application to leverage this data. Well, all of a sudden they can do so without having to worry about scalability issues, data security issues, and things of that nature. So the social component is truly at the center of everything that we do. So, Katie, if you let me know when there is a question, I can just continue talking. But
we do have a few questions from the phone lines. Our first question comes from John Bridenstine. Your line is now open.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is great. First of all, I want to commend Robert Peasley for pulling this together because, at a time where we are really trying to get our heads around what Smartest Cities is and how we can best represent U.S. company interests in the region, having this kind of a presentation to open up our minds and our eyes to all that's possible out there is superb. And so, thank you for that, and thank you very much for the presentation. I like the inclusivity aspect of it that you just pointed out in terms of it being an open platform that folks can utilize and can get involved in and really can expand, only limited by one's imagination in terms of the work that you could capture with this kind of platform. My question goes, and if you said this, I'm sorry, I may have missed it, but with regard to this kind of platform, are there standards, or is this sort of open to anybody because it is applicable to any type of platform that might be existing out there? Or I don't know if I'm articulating this very well, but I guess my question would be, are there any hurdles regarding platforms or regarding things within the European Union that concern you with regard to sort of launching this on a region-wide basis?
Right, yeah, I understand your question, definitely. So thank you for that, and thank you for the kind remarks. Really, when you're dealing with such a broad information space, data does come in multiple different formats. And people do understand this data in very personalized formats themselves. So the challenge really is understanding and mapping that information into something that is dependable and predictable at the platform level. So because we are focused on, say, the built environment, so commercial buildings, primarily in residential buildings as well, we've adopted a data dictionary that is created by the Department of Energy, which is called BEADS. It's the Building Energy Specifications Exchange data, I think, specifications dictionary. So anytime you start importing data into the Maalka system, it maps it into a dependably named format. So when third-party application developers come and want to leverage this information, they can be confident that it will be called this and it will be in this format. So in that way, you can think of Maalka as this kind of translator or Rosetta Stone, but it is up to the person who is implementing the data import to choose what this mapping is going to look like. But Maalka, if you want to subscribe to that application, will enable third-party developers to utilize this information. So in exchange for providing access to, say, new market segments, whether that's at the national level or city level, for these developers need to understand that interoperability is a huge issue. So it's definitely baked into what we do, and open standards is something that we take very seriously. But thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Carol Potomi. Your line is now open.
Hi, this is Cheryl in San Jose, California. I had a question about, and again, you might have gone over this already, but data protection and storage. And so how is that done through your platform, or is it done through the sources of your data, like you said, the California Energy Commission? And then kind of similar to the data protection, do things like the GDPR in Europe apply to your platform or not, since it's building and energy data?
Thank you for the question. So data security is just as important as everything else in terms of the scalability and flexibility issues of Maalka. So Maalka is built using the best practices for separating, say, personal identifiable information from building level meta information from meter level information. So if you get compromised in one aspect, it has no ability to associate with the different other levels of the system. So in terms of the Maalka's architecture, security is definitely baked into everything we do. What Maalka does then is when information is available, once it is authenticated, Maalka develops these associations and provides them into this network that takes data at an as-needed basis and enables these applications to take hold. So in terms of how we're built, it's extremely secure in terms of the separation of different types of data. Authentication is basically a standard that is baked into everything we do using OAuth authentication. That also allows you to use third-party verification tools and to authenticate your user identity and things like that. So the answer to the general data question is yes, it's built to be extremely secure. In terms of the actual European requirements, that's something that we would basically have to just understand a little bit more. But if they're anything aligned with the NIST data security standards in the United States, that's something that would be very easily supportable. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Once again, if you would like to ask a question from the phone lines, please press star then 1 and record your name when prompted. We are currently showing no questions in queue.
Thanks, Katie. This is Rob again. So we must, since we're all, as you know, very keen and interested in exporting and helping companies like yours get overseas, do you have any, let's say, experiences or any sort of anecdotes you might be able to share with us with your existing international market development?
Yeah, something to understand is we are a relatively new company. We're about 2 years old. We started with some support of my own by the Department of Energy. And then from that, we've been really organically growing from city to city and state to state here in the United States. So the international market perspective is something that is ongoing and developing at the moment. So we're recently created an agreement with a party in Benelux as well as the UK. We have some discussions with some stakeholders in India. But in terms of our status there, it's something that we could use help with in establishing these relationships with not just local channel partners, but also clients, both public and private. I mentioned many times this energy benchmarking initiative. The reason that we focused so much here on energy benchmarking is because this is a trend that has really taken hold in the United States over the past few years, and it's now starting to really take hold in markets in Europe and in Asia, as well as Australia and the Pacific. So understanding the opportunities where these new cities and stakeholders are trying to follow in the footsteps of these cities in the U.S. Would give us an opportunity to spread these best practices as quickly and efficiently as possible. So I think that's how we're viewing these opportunities. And then on the private side, it's really depends on the initiatives of these organizations. We're talking to some commercial real estate organizations that want to track indoor air quality across these large portfolios, and that's important because if they're leasing this information or these spaces to, say, an extremely expensive consultant who might be traveling to a city with extremely high pollution, they'll be able to use something like Maalka to inform them, maybe this week isn't such a good week for you to come out. Maybe you should go to another city with potentially a better air quality to not risk getting sick. So there are international components to organizations and then local municipality opportunities in these new countries as well. So those are the opportunities that we're looking for the most.
Great. Thanks so much, Remus. Katie, do we have any other questions in the queue?
We are showing no questions in the queue at this time.
Okay. Well, look, Remus, I really appreciate you taking the time this afternoon and for everyone in the audience to join. This is the first of a series. We're going to do these at least quarterly, maybe even more than that. We have a number of companies that have lined up and are interested in speaking to us and helping us to understand smart cities. And this obviously has been recorded, so we will put it up on Salesforce Chatter, and Remus will get a listing of who's on this call, and we'll share his information with you as well. And so as he does embark and Maalka embarks on their international market development, we hope that we can help you out in a lot of our different offices around the world. So thank you again, Remus, and I hope to see you back here in Europe very soon.
Sounds good, Robert, and thanks again for the opportunity, and to everyone in this call who participated. We are starting to expand quite quickly, so I do look forward to meeting many of you in person, and I'll send some information regarding contacts for follow-up questions as well as some materials in the near future. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may disconnect at this time.